Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Community Connection. And right now, we have probably one of our Mount Rushmore educational leaders on this show, all the way from, where are you, Arnie, right now? Where are you?
Chicago, home in Chicago.
Oh, sweet home Chicago, baby. The Honorable Arne Duncan. What's going on, brother? How you doing, man?
Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate the chance.
All right, Arnie, we're going to jump right into it, man. What do you consider a more impressive achievement? Winning the celebrity MVP basketball tournament or being named the Secretary of Education? Which one?
So I always got to be honest. So to be very honest, I did not win the celebrity MVP. Kevin Hart won it. And out of the kindness of his heart, he gave me the trophy, which I have in the house. He sent it to me. So that was a charity MVP, and had a lot of fun with those games. I'm very competitive. Nobody else cares in those, but I'm 5-0. I never lost. I went undefeated in those games. No one has a clue. No one will ever know that. But a lot of fun for my kids. But obviously, compared to having a chance to serve the country, no comparison.
I love it, man. Man, I watched some YouTube videos, bro. You're a hoopster, man. You are like, man, Arnie could hoop.
Well, I still love the game, and I play this morning. We play every morning. That's my stress relief, and we're all older and slower than ever, but still super competitive. Still out there yelling at each other. It's pretty funny.
I love it. That's the only way to play.
But that's,
so you haven't migrated to pickleball yet, I see.
It's so funny to say that. I'm thinking like, what's wrong with me? Why everybody else? I'm so late on these trends. So that may be coming, but never golf. So maybe pickleball, never golf. But one day maybe. But I'm going to keep playing as long as my body holds up. And so far, I've been pretty lucky.
So Arnie, like the world knows you, educators know you, but just a little bit, man. We're so fascinated by your meteoric rise. It's like when you look at it on paper, you did take a non-traditional route to becoming CEO, right, of Chicago schools, and then into the Secretary of Education. I mean, like, what do you contribute to that, man? Is it right place, right time? Is it just like grinding it out and just pouring your heart and soul in? And I know your mother was an educator. I mean, you come from this background. What was it, man? Like, because it's quite a fascinating story.
Yeah, I'll give a little context for your listeners and viewers to get a sense. So I grew up here in Hyde Park. I literally lived 2 blocks from where I grew up, on the campus of the University of Chicago. My dad was a professor there and taught there, went to grad school there, never left, and was there for over 40 years. And like you said, my mother ran an inner city tutoring program. What was very interesting is her program was literally 12 blocks from where we lived. Like, we literally walked there some days. But it was across 47th Street, was an invisible barrier between middle class integrated Hyde Park and all black, all poor North Kenwood, Oakland. And her program was at 46 in Greenwood. So I was born in 64, my sister in 67, my brother in 70. We were all raised literally from birth going to her program. So I went to an after school program way before I ever went to a real school. And it was just incredibly formative experience that we've all tried to follow in her footsteps in various ways. I took a year off of college between my junior and senior year to work full time with her and write my senior thesis about her work. She did the work for 52 years until her health gave out. She died last year due to Alzheimer's. Sorry. It's a terrible disease. But what I saw all my life was what didn't matter if you were, poor, tough family background, gang issues. When you had folks like my mother in your life, you could go on to do great things. And these were my friends. This is who I grew up with. I can go through a lot of this. So that's been the driving motivator in my life, is just trying to close what I call the opportunity gap, that my friends in the after school program were as smart, as talented, as committed, as hardworking as my friends during the day. People talk about different zip codes. This was the same zip code. Again, this was walking distance, just wildly different opportunities. And that fundamental unfairness, it's just, again, that's where I get all my passion from. So everything sort of goes back to that. I got a million stories, but her philosophy was that 10-year-olds taught 5-year-olds and 5-year-olds taught 10-year-olds. So we all, and 15-year-olds taught 10-year-olds. So we all grew up teaching and being taught. And that the young man who taught me growing up for years, and this is public, it's nothing we haven't talked about publicly, but he recently retired, just went into like the National Inventors Hall of Fame, has worked in Silicon Valley forever, multiple patents, is a complete rock star. But when he was born, and he lived literally a block from my mother's program, he was born, his mother, who had lots of challenges, wrapped him in newspaper and threw him in the garbage.
Wow.
And his grandmother fished him out of the garbage and raised him. So he literally started life in a garbage can.
That's crazy.
And it is, I get chills thinking about it. His grandmother raised him, and he started going to my mother's program at a young age, and she saw his talents, and he was managing her checkbook when he was like 13, 14, and he was teaching us, and he went to DePaul and in law school. So he stayed in the community, probably taught my group of guys for 10 or 12 years. But that's the kind of thing, I think, how many people are literally and figuratively thrown away if they have a chance. He's had this extraordinary professional career and shaped me and all my friends coming up. But it could have turned out very, very differently. And so that's where all of my passion, that's where all of I can walk through, different steps along the journey. But, growing up as a part of that from birth until I went to college, basically every day other than going to basketball practice in high school, that is why I do what I do. That's what shaped me.
Fascinating. That's great.
That's great.
That's a great story. And you continue to advocate. You're still doing, you're still helping, communities, and saw something about, your, whether it's advocating for, decreasing gun violence and doing some other things. So you're still living out your mother's legacy in a way, right?
Yeah. So for the past 8 years, a little bit of a left turn coming back from DC. I've run a nonprofit called Chicago CRED, CRED, which stands for Creating Real Economic Destiny. We work with men and women and teens who are most at risk of shooting and being shot on the south and west sides of Chicago. We started working with 25 guys in one room. We now have 9 centers and serving over 1,000 in the different neighborhoods. Awesome. But I would say it's honestly, it's the hardest thing I've ever done. It's the most heartbreaking. You deal with some incredibly difficult and dangerous and tragic situations, but it's also the most meaningful work I've ever done. And giving people a chance to put down the guns and do something else is it's an extraordinary gift to be part of that journey. So we've come a long way. We have a long way to go. For me, gun violence has been the cancer that's sort of been eating the soul of our city since I started to lose friends to gun violence when I was a teen. And so people say you could have gone anywhere and done anything, and theoretically that's true. But honestly, all I want to do is come home and try and do a better job. I say we just want to give kids their childhoods back. And so
wonderful.
Love it. It's been 8 years. I can't believe how fast it's gone. And we've come a long way. Numbers are going down pretty significantly, but we're not anywhere near where I want to be yet.
Yeah.
Great work. Arne, again, sorry to hear about your mom. I am sure that she must have been so incredibly proud of your rise and what you accomplished in education.
Yeah, it's interesting. She wasn't easily impressed. She was not,
but doesn't get much bigger than you. It doesn't get much bigger than you, Arne.
She was a tough cookie. But at every step, the honest answer is that whether it was starting my sister, our own small public school, to going to CPS, to leading CPS, to going to DC, I literally thought every day about the lessons I learned at 46 in Greenwood and what works for kids and what doesn't, and just tried to take to scale what I had seen happen in one little church basement.
Yep.
It's great.
Arne, to get in a little bit into the numbers a little bit, the latest the NAEP, NAEP results, as I'm sure you've seen, show that student achievement, particularly in reading, has declined to the lowest level in decades. The achievement gap has been widening since the pandemic. I just saw something from Dr. Rosa at the Edunomics Lab at Georgetown, looking at return on investment, a lot of states spending more, students achieving less. Are we investing in the right areas, or do we need a different approach, Arne?
Yeah, that's a very, very important question. I'll answer it a couple ways. I have felt, and I'm again not in this every day, all day like I used to be, so I'm a little bit more distant, so I want to qualify it. But I have not felt the sense of urgency that we as a nation have needed. And you guys know this is your life's work. Going into the pandemic, we had tens of millions of kids across the country who were way too far behind. And that gap widened during the pandemic pretty substantially. The number of kids further behind increased. And we know that the kids who are the most privileged, they kept learning during the pandemic. They were going to be fine. And so the gap between the haves and the have-nots has gotten much, much larger, and the number of have-nots has increased dramatically.
Yes.
And so for me, this is an existential crisis. And I've not felt, again, just being honest, I've not felt the sense of urgency on this issue, and the idea of like losing a generation of young people who don't have the skills they need to, go to college or go into the world of work. That terrifies me for them, for their families, for our country's economy, for our country's democracy at all sorts of levels. So two things that I know work, and lots of education we can study and get more evaluation. High dosage tutoring, we know that works. High quality, high dosage tutoring is super effective at helping to close gaps. And just more time, whether it was, that was my mother's whole thing, more after school, more Saturdays, less summers. We know about summer, summer slides, summer reading loss. And so those two things, buying more time for tutoring and just buying more time for more instruction, partnering with parents, we know what works. And so we've had some of that. We have not had it at scale. We have not had it sustained the way it needs to be. And what has really troubled me is, again, I used to track all this stuff, is 50 states. I was always interested, like, what are the best 5 states in anything? And what are the worst 5 states? And what do we learn and how do we challenge? And 15,000 school districts. What are the 100 that are doing the best job of closing gaps? Sitting here today talking to you, I don't have answers to those questions. I don't know. There's, for me, a lack of transparency. There's a lack of sort of accountability. And it's not a competition, but it's just a chance to learn from each other. So long answer to your question, I'm desperately worried. I do not think we have invested sufficiently in those two things that we know work. And the problem is not going away. It's going to haunt us for decades. I'll never say it's too late. It's not too late, but I don't see who's really jumping on this at scale.
Arne, question is going to kind of respond to that. Just that economics lab, Mississippi and Louisiana are 2 states that were surprising to me that their return on investment has shown an increase. And just not knowing much about those states, they would not have been near the top of states I would have guessed are showing a good return on their education investment.
So Mississippi has been focused on this for years. It's been a great public-private partnership with wealthy businessman down there, James Barksdale, who has invested significantly. But you had a state that was committed. You had a state commissioner of education, state school chief, Carrie Wright, who was fantastic, and she's now in Maryland. And so they're no, they call it a miracle. It's not a miracle. It's not an overnight success.
Not a miracle, right?
Discipline and focus and teacher training and professional development and high quality. It's all stuff we know that works, but they execute it. So it's not the theory of it that matters. It's the implementation of it.
Absolutely.
And those results, if it can happen in Mississippi, it can happen anywhere. Mississippi is always on every metric, 48, 49, 50. And you're right. I'm never looking at absolute, like Massachusetts is always at the top, which is great. But I'm looking, to your point, who are the fast growers? Who's gaining? To see Mississippi gain, to see Louisiana gain, that should give us all hope. Like, we know this is possible. The question for me is, if it does work and it's showing to work, why isn't everybody doing this again together? And that's the challenge, but honestly, the massive opportunity I think our country has before us today.
It's a great tee up for Provincio's question.
Well, and that question, Arne, what the hell's going on with the Secretary of Ed, man? With that right there, it's like, it's, I'm watching the news feed, like I'm I'm watching it. I'm trying to get as much information as I can. Eric and I are right outside of DC, and it's like, we kind of know what works. Like you were talking about, like Mississippi, Louisiana. What are those positive deviants doing? And why not even something as simple as you said? Why do we still have an agrarian calendar for public schools? It makes zero sense. It makes zero sense when we know that more time in school is great every year. It's like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. We know the power of teachers, more so, and great leadership, more so than curriculum. Like, curriculum doesn't do anything magical. It's the teachers that deliver it. So, like, all right, Arne, congratulations. You're the new Secretary of Ed. what would you do? You all right? You get invited back to that department. What would you do,
Yeah.
man?
So I'll just give you what I think can happen in my honestly very grave concerns about what is going to happen.
Yeah.
So historically in education, time has been the constant,
Yeah.
and learning has been the variable. And people went to school whether it's 9 to 2:30 or whatever it might be. And for me, we just have to fundamentally flip that on its head. And learning has to be the constant, is time, and time is the variable. And so certain kids, 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, 9 months out of the year, that works fine.
Yep.
And my kids had no musical ability. My wife and I had no musical ability, but had my kids wanted to take a trumpet lesson or learn to play the piano, we could have managed that ourselves.
Sure.
Other kids need 8 or 10 or 12 hours a day. Other children need 6 days a week, 7 days a week, 11 months out of the year. I had kids in Chicago when I led Chicago public schools, and 85% of our children live below the poverty line.
Right.
We fed some kids 3 meals a day.
That's right.
We had a couple thousand kids that on Fridays we would very discreetly send them home with a backpack full of food because we worried about them not eating over the weekend and coming back to school hungry. And so whether it's 5 hours a day or 10 or 12, whether it's 1 meal a day lunch or 2 or 3, whether it's a wide variety of dance and drama and art and music,
Sure.
not just the academics, to give us a reason to be excited about coming to school. We just have not had that mentality ever. And so that for me would be the fun. I mean, lots to dig into if you want to there, but that for me is the dynamic that has to change. Is we have to meet every child where they are, have a plan for them academically, socially, emotionally, physically. Do they need eyeglasses? Do they need to go to the dentist? Do they need 3 meals? They need meals on the weekends. And how do we partner with their parents? And I've worked with poor parents all my life. I don't think my mother ever had a parent who went to college, but
Right,
they all wanted the best for their child, and they wanted we had people going to medical school. I mean, it's just stuff because so every parent wants the best for a child. They're not all know what that looks like or how to get there. So that partnership, to your point, between great teachers and parents and students, and being honest about strengths and weaknesses and where we need to go, that's what I would do. Having said that, we are in unprecedented times, and I'm always very honest, and people can push back and disagree. Sure. And I've really, really tried to understand. But if you look at the history of education, and I'm going to talk specifically for a moment about Republican presidents. Our first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, during the Civil War, created the land grant colleges. Just absolutely transformational opportunity. For our country. Go to the last 70 years, Eisenhower created health, education, and welfare. That department that sort of put education on the map. You talk about Pell Grants, this amazing opportunity. Guess who signed that into law?
Nixon.
That was Nixon. Your history. That was Nixon. Made done some other things that weren't so fantastic, but he did that. You go to Ford and IDEA. You look at Bush 1 and Bush 2. No child left behind. So education, I always say, should be the ultimate bipartisan or nonpartisan issue. There's nothing
100%.
left or right about teaching a kid to read and high graduation rates. Every Republican president until this point has seen education as being in our nation's interest,
right,
and a national interest. And what we have now is an assault on public education. I say that very plainly, very honestly. And it is extraordinarily concerning. That assault is just beginning. And we know who the Department of Education funds. It funds vulnerable kids. It adds, we know the play, 90% of the fund, you guys all know this, comes at state and local level. What we do at the federal level is you supplement that for kids who are at more risk. So more pre-K, so that our babies can enter kindergarten ready to be successful. Money for poor children, Title I. Money for children with special needs, IDEA. Lunches, we talked about that. Pell Grants, we talked about that. So first generation and families that don't have a lot of wealth have a chance to go to college. And to start to dismantle the Department of Education, to start to take away those opportunities from the most vulnerable, the potential for devastation here is extraordinary. And so I'm not a scared guy. I deal with gun violence every single day.
Yep.
I am very scared for our country's future. I'm scared for our education. And I'm scared for our democracy. We have never seen something like this ever in our nation's history. And I want to be extraordinarily plain and clear and honest about that.
Well, Arne, you anticipated my next question was if the president does dismantle or defund the Department of Ed, what would be the negative implications? I think you already sadly answered that. So I'm going to jump to a little bit of a shift. Ultimately, Arne Duncan, what do you think the roles of our schools should be? And who should decide that? Should it be a national or state decision?
Yeah, I think, I wrestle with this stuff every day.
Yeah.
And one of the joys of my job in DC was I didn't spend much time on my desk. I went to visit all 50 states, went to hundreds and hundreds of schools, early childhood, elementary, middle, high school, community college, 4-year. And, rural Mississippi is different than, urban Detroit, and Wyoming's different than California. And so this is not a thing where I think there's a one size fits all mentality. What I do think, what I would love to have is I would love to have some goals for our country. And again, not left or right or R&D goals, but nation building goals. So let me just give you a couple, and again, your listeners can debate them or push back, but I'd love to see a goal of dramatically increasing access to high quality pre-K, because we know that investment is arguably the best investment we can make so that babies don't start kindergarten a year and a half to 2 years behind and often never catch up. I would love to have a focus on third grade reading. If our babies aren't, able to read for understanding and be fluent by the time they're in third grade, we're really struggling. I would love to see us keep increasing high school graduation rates. If you drop out of high school today, you're basically condemned to poverty and social failure. There are no good jobs out there. And I would love to see us have a goal of leading the world in college completion. And that could be 4-year, it could be 2-year, it could be trade, technical, vocational training, whatever it is, but some form of education beyond high school. So if we had some national goals, then we could look at every single community and see what works well in rural America, what works well with English language learners, what works well, and we could learn and scale what happens. But right now as a nation, we have no goals, we have no strategies, and we have no measurement against any of that. So for me, we are lost in the wilderness, and that for me is a devastating place to be.
Yeah. So Arne, I know you're next, Prince here, but who are the thought leaders who are pushing back against this potential education apocalypse that could be happening? Who is leading the charge?
Well, I mean, this is real time, as you know, and I'm, for better or worse, I've felt compelled to jump back into this space. So I've been traveling and spoke in DC at a press conference last week with Senator Murphy, and flew to Orlando and spoke to 2,000 educators there. I'm doing this with you guys that 2 or 3 years ago, honestly, I wouldn't have done, because it wasn't sort of what I'm focused. So I am trying to provide whatever leadership I can. We all need to do this together. To your point, I don't think we have a coherent structure yet of who's doing what. And again, for me, it's not even just about education. It's really about our country's under assault here at public education is. And so it's a really fair question where I feel too often now we're getting steamrolled, and how we start to, talk, build coalitions, talk to real parents and real students and real teachers. The amount of fear I'm feeling from teachers, I've never experienced anything like this. The amount of emotion, I can't even describe it. And what I felt was so visceral last week. And so we are not as coordinated, we are not as strategic as we need to be. And that's a very fair critique that we have to get to a better place quickly.
I mean, there's got to be a centrist answer to this. It can't be it's not going to be far right. It can't be far left either. It's got to be a both sides responding to what we want to see for our students in America.
Well, so my honest opinion is that what you need now is 4 or 5 Republican congressmen to stand up and say, this is bad for my kids, bad for my community, and bad for the districts I serve. When I went to DC, I took an oath to serve. And for me, that was an oath I took for life. And all those guys took the same oath I did. And the question is, did they take an oath to serve their constituents, the public, or did they take an oath to serve Musk and Trump? And for me, there's just a fundamental dichotomy between those two things. So we have not seen one, to be very candid, step up. And when I talked in DC, I tried to talk very specifically to that group. Absent that, we need to do our thing to also challenge. But I would love to see a bipartisan coalition fighting for kids. As we're taping this today, I can't say I'm wildly hopeful that happens. It may only happen when people really, really start to get hurt back home. And I do not want people to suffer. I desperately don't want kids to suffer. I hope it doesn't get to that point. But my honest concern is, even if people at home, let's just say they, start to cut funding for special needs kids, or funding for Title I, or cut with, Pell Grants. Even if that happens, would we get a few Republicans to step up into that gap? Sitting here today, I can't say with any certainty that we would, and that's incredibly discouraging and concerning to me. That's my honest take today.
Yeah, Arne, that's I agree with you, man. And I hope that in a way that there is anger is a pretty powerful motivator. And I do hope that people are really pissed off about this. I hope that people that maybe were silent and sitting on the back lines, and I'm talking to educators, I'm talking about some of our educators that are a powerful demographic, that maybe they did not speak up and let someone else speak for them. And I think when that happens, you absolve yourself of that responsibility and that voice. And I whether it's unions or just educate, it doesn't matter. I just think that educators need to they have so much of a voice and a platform. And I'll tell this, if you're an educator listening, why are you not running for a school board office? Why are you not running for local government? We need more educators in Congress, and we don't. And Arne, look, I get it, man. I understand. So many of the politicians that make decisions, this is what it is, right? Were their students, were their own children in public schools. I get it, right? So if you're not from that kind of world, and if you're not involved with educators like your mother was, like you were, it becomes an abstract concept. So right now, this assault, and I do agree with you, on public schools is coming from people that have no vested interest in public schools. And I feel bad for our educators, but I hope that they're so angry, because I'm angry, that when those opportunities to vote in our best interest happens, we stop being silent and we step up and we speak with our vote more so than we've ever had before. And I think that there's a powerful demographic out there that needs to speak up. So
but you need a strong center. Like you said, we don't need the wings. You need the center.
We need the center.
I think of back when I was younger, and there was the coalition of Bush and Clinton, right? Both sides coming together for a common purpose that both sides could hopefully believe in. I don't know that we can do that these days, but it would be great if we could, because that's what I think our centrists need, a leader. And Arne, I appreciate you going out and doing that work for us.
Yeah, I'll do whatever I can. And you're both right. We need a bottom up. We need a top down. We need all of the above. This is a challenge to our country that we have never seen in our lifetimes. And I don't know that we'll come out the other end okay. I can't say that will happen. And again, not the world order and him calling Zelensky in Ukraine a dictator. Like, this is the whole world order is shifting before our eyes, and this is not a drill. This is the real thing. But my numbers won't be exact, but my understanding is about 20% of teachers across the country voted for Trump, and for many possible reasons. And just the question is this what you voted for? And maybe it is, and maybe that's the answer. But if it's not, and your point is about speaking up, that someone has a quote that the darkest recesses of hell are reserved for those that stay silent.
That's right.
And this is I am people come to me every day. Are you sure you want to speak up? Do you putting yourself, your family, your kids at risk? And maybe I am, maybe I'm not. But I just say I can't be silent during this time. I just can't. And whatever consequence happens, I hate to say it, I prefer that than being quiet. And there is an extraordinary power of teachers collectively.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I feel their fear. It was visceral. It was unlike anything I've ever known my entire life. And what I always say with the guys I work with, it's okay to be scared. That's real. It's okay to have fear. The question is, do you let that paralyze you?
Yeah.
Does that stop you from doing whatever? And I think we should. I am scared today. I said that. I am fearful. I'm not going to deny that. But I cannot let that paralyze me. I got to propel that to give me fuel to act.
That's
and
right.
So that's what I would just challenge your listeners and educators to think of. Yes, it's okay to be scared. Is it okay to hide? Is it okay to be silent? And it's not us. We're not just fighting. This isn't a selfish fight. We're fighting for our kids and we're fighting for our country. Like there's nothing more altruistic, more patriotic than that. None of us are fighting for our own, benefit.
Right.
And we owe it to our kids and we owe it to our country, I think, to engage now in ways that we never had, because we've never seen anything like this ever. And I pray to God we never do again.
Yeah. Arne, what does that look like to you? Like, what does action look like to you? So what would you want to see from our educators?
Yeah, that's the right question. And I'm probably not as tight in my answer. But I think what I always saw my job every day, and I did it very imperfectly every day. My job was to fight for kids. And what I would like to see our educators, we can agree and disagree on lots of issues, but I think none of us want this assault on education. None of us want this assault on educational opportunity. None of us want to see fewer people have access to a high quality education.
Right. Correct.
But we can disagree on 80% of things, 90% of things, but where's that circle on the Venn diagram that we all agree? It's here. And so having voices heard, yes, running for something, but it's like we can't even wait. Having voices heard now, we can't wait 2 years. We don't, this country might be, we've been at this has been a month. This has been 4 weeks. Can you imagine 4 months of this?
Yeah.
4 years?
4 years.
It's like, I'm sitting here today, I can't fathom where we might be if we do not find ways to challenge this, collectively. So having voices heard, again, regardless of political party, regardless of coming together, there's power in the people. I just very, very, I always say that, the most powerful role in any, here is that of citizen. We were all citizens. And so stepping up, having our collective voices heard, fighting on behalf of kids, that cannot wait. So I don't know if that answers your question precisely,
no, absolutely.
Eric, but that's what we need.
It's not an easy
now.
question to answer, right, Arne? There is no, unfortunately, right answer. And I don't know if it's writing your congressman, writing your senator. I don't know if that helps.
Burn up for all of that. I think you're right. I think there's probably no perfect answer. There are multiple right answers, but the wrong answer is to stay in the sidelines.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The wrong answer is to just hunker down and this too shall pass, because it might not pass. The wrong answer is I'm scared, so I'm just going to sit back. And no, we're all scared. We're all scared.
Yeah.
They got to use that to, you could have tremendous bravery and courage while you're scared. Those things aren't in conflict.
Yeah.
Right. Arne, on, so much right now in the kind of like the lexicon and the conversations about schools has been school choice, vouchers, charter schools. You've promoted charter schools. It's and you've part of your role in Chicago public schools, some schools needed to be closed for whatever reason. I'm a proud public first educator. I want all of our public schools to be the best damn schools possible, right? So that there's not even any choice except for our public schools being that outstanding. Maybe it's a naive, look at, but that's how I roll. But I also believe that families want to make sure that they do the right decisions for their children. I absolutely agree with that. Looking back, for, in your role, where do you see charter schools, voucher kind of like playing out in this conversation, both in your past experience and being more pivotal right now in the conversation? I want to tap into your brain on this one.
Yeah. So again, this is a very different time. So I want to delineate between the two. So the current crowd will push a voucher hard agenda. They've been there are lots of things. They're not subtle. They are overt. They're clear on it. And for me, that is just part of the assault on public education. Right. And so, we know, you always look to places like Florida, all the stuff comes out of Florida. So the book bans, where does that come from? Florida, the voucher comes out. And I try and, be rational, study the stuff. In Florida, a lot of the folks who benefited from vouchers were actually the wealthy.
Right.
It was just a tax subsidy, a tax break for the wealthy. And a lot of this for me is a transfer of wealth, transfer of resources from the poor and the vulnerable, the Title I, the IDEA, the Pell Grants. It's a transfer of resources from there to Elon Musk with a $400 million contract from Tesla, from the federal government. And this is all about follow the money. This is a chance to enrich themselves personally. Trump and Musk, this is all a game, a con, a fraud, a grift to do that. So that's what we're seeing, play out. And, none of us should want any part of that. And what I will say historically, so again, this is a separate, when I ran the Chicago public schools and 600 schools and, 400,000 students, what I wanted, to your point, was I wanted to have a great option for every family. Right. Ideally, I would have in any neighborhood 2 or 3 or 4 great options, and maybe it's a STEM school, maybe it's a fine and performing arts school, maybe it's an IB school. If you have 3, 4, 5 kids, they all learn differently, have different interests, and provide those options. What I was not comfortable with was having a community with no good options. And so for me, there's nothing. I always say I was not a charter advocate. I was a high quality charter advocate. And so I went to the National Charter Convention and said, your best schools I visited, where you have 95% high school graduation rates and 90% of those graduates are going to college. I want you to serve more students. I want you to grow and do more. And 200 of your schools are actually dropout factories across the country, and they need to be closed down. Yep. And so for me, I'm not caught in neighborhood or magnet or charter or whatever. I just want to have great options for kids, and particularly in underserved neighborhoods. This conversation we're having, charters, vouchers, that's irrelevant in rural communities.
Sure,
I spent time in communities, so this is not helping. I spent time in communities where kids are on a bus hour and a half every day, one way to get to their school. I mean, that's just real. And so anyone who says like, this is the answer, is not. And then the final thing I'll say is I looked hard. We actually, in DC, the Department of Education funded, were mandated by Congress, we funded a voucher program in DC. So I looked at that data very carefully. Yeah. And what I saw was those students actually underperforming the kids that stayed in traditional schools. So I'm just big on sort of evidence and data, not on sort of political rhetoric and divisive politics and wedge issues. And honestly, had the data come back that those kids were performing 2 times, 3 times better, that would have changed my opinion. That wasn't what I thought was happening, and that was confirmed when I got on there. And for me, the challenge in all this stuff is there's almost never any accountability for results for kids. Right. And so for me, I want accountability. I want more kids reading, more kids graduating. And if you're basically giving a taxpayer subsidy to go someplace where you're actually doing worse academically, you're hurting that child, you're hurting the family, and you're wasting taxpayer money. Yeah. And I thought every day in DC, it sounds crazy, but we were dealing with big budgets. But I thought like every nickel was coming out of your pocket. That's right. In your pocket, and my family's pocket. I had, even more so than if it was my own money, I felt such a fiduciary and educational responsibility to try and spend every nickel wisely, because I know how hard we all work. And again, did everything more than imperfectly, but to spend money on things that don't help kids, they're actually now trying to dismantle public education. Yeah. That's, for me, it's like morally bankrupt. It's education makes no sense, but it's more than education. It's morally bankrupt.
Yeah. Arne, this might be a kind of a nuanced conversation, but like I'm a educational pedagogical nerd, right? I'm a pedagogy knucklehead, right? And standards are always something that have been very fascinating with me. And so with Common Core, I remember having conversations with my teachers, basically saying, all right, we're going to implement, actually, it was Virginia, so we didn't have Common Core. Virginia did its own damn thing. I don't know what we were doing, but 2,000 standards-ish, K-12. So in American education, Common Core had about 2,000, actually it's probably more, around 2,500 standards from K-12 that we had to get our kids, ready for. And I think in most states now, even though, Common Core is kind of, it's around 2,000 standards. That's a lot of standards. And like, we want rigorous standards, but like, is it a quality kind of conversation? I always look at our Scandinavian neighbors, they have like 300 standards, like a total different kind of universe, right? But like, that's a lot. I'm just curious your thought. I want to pick your brain on that one too, because you were, such a pivotal part of, Race to the Top and making sure that we had high standards, but 2000, and it's still about that for K-12. So anyway, more of a pedagogical geeky question. Just curious your thoughts about that one.
It's a great question. Let me sort of step back and again say what sort of the motivation was and what we were trying to do. There were two things. Prior to going to DC, I hadn't spent much of any time with military families, but I spent a lot of time with military families. And these are families that, literally risked their lives and deployed overseas. But as you know, they're often moving every year or two. So you have kids that go to 6, 8, 10 different schools in different states. And what I heard just horrified me is they would be in one state and think they're doing fine and move to another state and they'd be 3 grade levels behind and move to some other place. And so for me, these are families that deserve the best. Like, if we're going to take care of anybody, we got to take care of the kids in military families. And they were being horribly served by 50 states doing their own thing and a lack of consistency. And those conversations were, really impactful for me. The second thing is we talk a lot about college being too expensive, and we're focused more on K-12 in this conversation, but that's a major concern. College is too expensive, but we don't talk about, and my numbers are not going to be as precise now as they were, but somewhere between 10 and $12 billion a year we spend on high school graduates to take college classes that are not credit bearing, meaning they're remedial classes where students are not prepared. And so they're burning through Pell Grants and loans and spending money. And I won't say, but I remember visiting a community where, and again, these are high school graduates, not the dropouts, where 75% of the high school graduates were all taking remedial classes. So that's the issue that I was looking at, of these huge disparities between states and so many young people not being prepared. So what we said, and again, we can talk about what worked and what didn't.
Right.
What we said is, I just wanted high standards. And for me, the goal was simply, if you graduate from high school, you can go to college and take credit-bearing classes. That was that was literally it. So in Texas, you could go to University of Texas. In Virginia, you could go to UVA, wherever it was. We just wanted, it wasn't we were certifying, we wanted the institutions of higher education to say, if they are hitting this mark, they have a chance to come to my university and take college classes for college credit.
Sure.
So we can debate whether they're the right standards, whether there are too many or whatever, but the lack of any rigor, the lack of any consistency was for me a huge issue. So one is standards, so that's trying to set a high bar. Second is curriculum, and as you guys know, because you guys live this, curriculum is very different than standards. Standards are what you need to know. Curriculum is what you teach. And we couldn't touch that and didn't touch that. That was against the law. That is now changing under the Trump administration, where they are starting to whitewash history. And the book banning from Florida. So again, all bets are off. This is a new world. But at that time, it was very clear that we had no role to play on a curriculum. And then the final thing is assessment. So assessments is how you evaluate where folks are meeting this. And so, in my mind, I always say, talk about, and you follow a sports team, there's only one score in the newspaper. There aren't 50 scores. If you invest in the stock market, there's one stock value every day, not 50. We had 50 measuring sticks, which for me was meant to be opaque, was meant to hide what was going on. And so what I would have loved to do, we didn't get there. We had sort of a couple consortia of states that came together, but I would love to have one common measuring stick as to whether folks are hitting these standards and how people get there to have flexibility. So that's a long answer to your question, but
no, it's
you
great.
have standards, you have assessment, and you have curriculum. Having high standards, I think, is desperately important. Curriculum, having flexibility but accountable, but having a common measuring stick for everybody. But if you had common standards And if you had a common evaluation, we would get there. So you saw the NAEP scores, which are like shocking to everybody. It's not shocking. No, that's where we know kids are. It's just we don't tell kids the truth across the country in between NAEP exams. And so it's not how we communicate to parents as educators. I think we do our kids and our families a grave disservice by not being more honest and partnering with parents to help their kids accelerate their learning.
Yeah.
Arne, we're gonna turn the page just a little bit as we get towards the end. So a couple of positive questions. First for me, what can we do to better support and retain great teachers?
Ooh, got another hour? So,
yeah, we do. We got all night.
We do.
No, man. So I'll just say, I mean, you guys know that the most important, you said it perfectly earlier, curriculum is sort of okay, sort of important. What's really, really, really important is great teachers.
Right.
Amen.
It's not even close, and people get confused on that basic issue. So the best thing we could do for our nation's children and for our country would be to put a great teacher in every classroom and a great principal into every school. And you guys know great principals attract and retain and support and mentor that great talent, and bad principals are scared by it and run it off. So I'm pretty radical. I think the whole teacher pipeline, how we train teachers in higher ed, how we attract them, how we support them, how we pay them, how we compensate them, how we let them develop, the whole pipeline is pretty broken in my honest estimation. So if you survey young teachers, 2/3 to 3/4 say they're not prepared to enter the classroom.
Right.
And that's not their fault. These are the most they're coming in to make a difference, and they're not trained well. And lots of, again, this is a broad statement, but higher ed, lots of theory and philosophy and history of education, not enough. How do you educate 28 or 30 or 32 very diverse learners?
How do you manage that class?
That's hard, man. Super hard. And but you got to have hands-on. I always look at the medical model and, sort of apprenticeship and spending time with a master teacher and, spending time learning the craft, not in a classroom, in a academic classroom, but in a real classroom. I'll start there. Secondly, I would pay teachers dramatically more. I would pay principals dramatically more. I'll never forget talking to teachers. I remember, like yesterday, talking to a teacher from North Carolina that had a rich history of education funding and, frankly, Republican leadership that starved education. And that teacher was selling blood, selling plasma to make
That's awful.
to pay the bills. And I'm like, no one goes into education to become a millionaire, but you shouldn't have to sell blood to do what you want to do. So that's fundamentally broken. I would pay teachers more to work in tough communities, inner city, urban, rural, remote, Native American reservations. Like, how do we help attract talent there? I would pay more where we have areas of critical needs, special ed, math, science, whatever. So there's a whole lot I would do differently, but I just fundamentally see education and investing in teachers as an investment.
Absolutely.
It's the best investment we can make, and not as an expense. I mean, it is such a challenging time. I thought during COVID, I said, this is like the worst time to be an educator in the past, 100 years. And it's arguably tougher now than during COVID. So I just want to be very real and acknowledging that. And again, COVID was challenging. It was difficult. There was not this level of fear that I'm feeling now. This is a different thing. There was, some fear about COVID early, but after a certain point, it was a really difficult. How do you teach on Zoom to 40 first graders? It's like impossible. So what I will say is that our kids need us now more than ever before. Our vulnerable children need us now more than ever before. If you happen to be from a migrant family, can you imagine the level of fear those kids are living with?
Right.
If your child is special needs and you already have all kinds of challenges, raising that child, and you love them to death, they need us. They need us. So education is, for me, it is nation building work. It's democracy building work. It's the only place to not just, teach, but to change and to transform lives. I've seen that power literally all my life. And that I would just desperately ask and plead of educators to stay with it. That our kids and our country and our communities need us more now than ever before. We need each other. We need to support each other. We need to help each other. We need to be real about the challenges. But man, this is This is a call to action time. And
Yep.
so I'll just say a huge thank you to, I hate that our profession is being assaulted. I hate this is what we're dealing with, but guess what? Here we are. Here we are. And if we can address it together, if we can get to a better place, I can't think of a more important thing any of us will ever do in our lifetime. And so it is a challenging, difficult, scary time, but a time of momentous opportunity. And it's time for us to stand up and to speak out and to help our kids and help our country get to a better place.
Love it.
Love it.
Thanks.
Arne, we're going to wrap up with something we like to call the lightning round. You ready?
And we'll find out.
And I'm going to give you some context, bro. It's all about Chicago. I'm in Hyde Park. What's the best place to get pizza?
Oh man, you're getting me in trouble here. I'll give you two: Medici and Pizza Capri.
Okay, very good.
Best band from Chicago.
Ooh, I wouldn't call him a band, but I'm a big fan of Common's. Common's a friend, and he's an extraordinarily socially conscious rapper. He's done a lot of work with us, and he's a great man.
Great. Get him on our show. We need Common on our show.
I was looking for Wilco or Smashing Pumpkins, but I'll take.
Yeah, no, and I would just say his mother was one of the best principals I had in Chicago public schools.
Wow, that's awesome.
She ran a very tough high school on the South Side and did an amazing job.
That's awesome. I didn't know about that.
Yep.
All right, White Sox or Cubs?
I'm a South Side boy, so I got to go Sox. I know it was a tough year.
It's always a tough year.
This is gonna be a tough one too. Best Chicago Bull of all time besides Jordan.
Ooh, that's a good one. Wow, that's not me. I think you got to go Pippen.
Okay,
Pippen.
all right.
Pippen is so underrated.
Batman needs Robin. Robin needs Batman.
Absolutely. All right. So pepper on the hot dog or no pepper on the hot dog?
I don't mess with salt or pepper. So just a little ketchup, mustard, and relish.
I guess I mean the little pepper and scene. You know those Chicago dogs? You got to put those peppers. I don't know what the hell.
I can't. I don't mess with them. Not for me. Those things are too hot.
Do you have a best song by the band Chicago?
I should and I don't. So
fair enough.
I failed that test. Yeah.
All right. Last question. Who would win in a cage match? Arne Duncan, Linda McMahon.
I'll say I'm closed on a serious note on a funny question. And I've said this publicly. I've said this to her team. I desperately want her to be successful.
Yep.
I do not want her to fail, because if she fails, our country fails. And so if she can come in there and actually fight for kids and create opportunity, I will do anything I can to support her.
Hell yeah.
I'm desperately concerned that that's not going to happen, and you'll just be a lapdog and a minion taking orders from Trump and Musk in the White House. But I sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, wish nothing but the best for her, because if she's successful, our kids in our country win.
Great answer.
Anything you want to shout out to our listeners about how to find you or organizations to be involved in?
No, I again, just to appreciate the commitment, appreciate the hard work. We are all in this together, and I'm happy to be a soldier in the Army. I'm happy to provide whatever leadership I can, but our nation's calling on us right now, and I hope we can step up collectively. We need to.
I love it.
We need to.
Arne, it is an honor and freaking pleasure, man, for you to share your time and space with us and our listeners. Listen, get back on the horse, bro. We need a voice. We need an advocate more like any before. Arne, it's just, I've always admired you. Eric and I have always admired you and your authenticity and your voice and your advocacy, brother. And I'll share with you something that my mom shared with me my first day of becoming a teacher. She said, make sure you treat every kid like they have your last name. And I've always lived by that. Every kid needs to have the best, just like that they're your own kid. And we can make decisions like our kids belong to us and not someone else. I think we would do a hell of a lot better than we're doing right now. So God bless you, Arne.
That's a great line. Never heard that. And your mother had a lot of wisdom. So just know I'm all in. You guys know how to get me. I'm all in.
Awesome.
Thank you, Arne.
Take care, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for a great conversation.
Thank you.